Hey, my name is Micah Siegel, and you're watching the Micah Siegel podcast. Any and all resemblance to the Lex Friedman podcast is entirely and 100% coincidental and completely unintentional. This video is brought to you by the Rogue Scholar Academy, and you can find that on roguescholaracademy.com. So go there and check it out so you can learn how to make the right education decisions. There we go. This is my dad, David Siegel. Today we're going to be talking about the history of money and how to counter inflation and how to run government and libertarian point of views in 1984 and monetary policy and whatever the heck else. So let's get into it.
Nice to be with you, Micah.
I always am. So the first question is the history of money. I don't know. I'm not sure.
That's a good topic. How do you think money got started?
Gold.
All right, let's start with the coincidence of wants. The coincidence of wants is where you make bread, and I have cows, so I have milk and meat. And you make bread every day. I don't want to just eat cows and milk and meat all the time. You don't want to just eat bread. So we figure out how to trade.
Yeah.
Now, for a local business, that works pretty well. But if I have a lot of meat, then I want you to take a bunch of meat, and then I want like credit for bread over time. And so we would scratch on some tablet or something. I don't know, maybe this is 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. And that I get free bread from you for a month or whatever.
But wouldn't they just negotiate? Okay, to me, I want 4 chickens and I have 8 loaves of bread.
Yeah.
And they just negotiate
a trade.
How many chickens is worth how much bread?
Yes, but over time they would repeat those transactions. And so they needed some way to keep account. They couldn't just always remember, and it didn't work very well, especially in a 3-way transaction where you have bread, somebody has chickens and I've got meat or milk. It's too hard. It gets too complicated as your little village grows to remember everything. So they would write down, not so much to make money, to make something to trade, but they would just write down who owes who. And so money at the very beginning really was an instrument of debt. Like I could just sort of scratch off every time I got a chicken, oh, now you owe me 1 less chicken. Okay, I got it. So that accounting tablet or paper or papyrus, whatever it was really the first money. Now, later, when tribes began to trade between each other from one village to another, then they needed something that was more like money to hand over to be able to pay with. All right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you, what's the definition of money, Micah?
Because I'm so indoctrinated, he has taught me 3 definitions, which I kind of forgot.
Money has to meet 3 conditions.
Yeah.
What are they?
One is the unit of account.
What's a unit of account?
Something I forget, but the next one is medium of exchange.
Medium of exchange.
And then store of value.
So a medium of exchange is not keeping track of debt. A medium of exchange is I give you these shells and you've got money. You can give those shells to somebody else. You can exchange those with somebody else. You don't have to know who owes who anymore. So that's really money, medium of exchange. What's a unit of account?
Unit of account? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Come on.
I don't know. Last time you talked to me about this was half a year ago.
When you look on a menu, you see the price of things.
Yeah.
Right? And the prices would be, 5,000 years ago would be in shells or something. And so that you can say that 1 cow is worth, let's say, 20 shells, and 1 chicken is worth 1 shell. That's a unit of account. Now we can value pretty much everything in terms of shells.
Yeah.
Right? All right. And what's the final thing?
Store of value.
Store of value, which is what. So if you hoarded a bunch of shells, then you can come back later to that and say, see, I'm still rich. I can now use those to pay. And at later times, they use something like a shiny metal, like brass or copper. And then eventually that became silver and gold. And you could just hoard your money. You could take your local everyday currency, turn it into gold, and then hoard that. You couldn't spend it, but you could later trade it, so it would be a store of value.
Okay.
And another store of value would be something like your home, right? You could use a bunch of money to buy a house. That's a store of value. Because then later, 20 years later, you could sell that house.
Were these official price points, or was it different for everybody? Like one farmer, let's say, had 15 potatoes that he wanted to sell, and he wanted to get at least 30 shells out of his 15 potatoes.
Right. So same as today, same with dollars.
Someone else might say, well, I want 8 of these 15 potatoes, but I don't want to pay that ratio.
But we have that today. When you say how much you want for your house or how much you want for your used Nintendo thing on eBay, you can say how much you want for it, and so you set your own price.
But then there's also like official Nintendo Switch prices, which say like this is $400, no negotiation.
But then if nobody buys it, then they may want to think about dropping their price. So that's the free market, and that's everybody names his own price. If you want to trade, 10 eggs for one sandwich, and someone else wants to trade 12 eggs for one sandwich, well then they might go get the 12 eggs instead of the 10.
All right, so the free market is based off
market pricing
and negotiation.
Anybody can
having it be worth it for both sides.
You know what we say? We say that whatever you want to sell is worth whatever someone will pay for it.
Yeah.
That's all.
He's told me that a lot for when I'm selling things.
Right. You can't sell your used tennis shoes for any more than somebody will pay to buy your used tennis shoes. All right, so money got started that way.
Yeah.
The unit of debt and the unit and money. Money would be the currency that we pay, and then debt instruments would be how much we owe to pay off our house or our car loan or for something you owe somebody. All right, so we have these two instruments. One is currency, and one is a debt instrument like a bond, say, right?
Okay.
Or an IOU. So then in the Roman times, even in the Greek times, they were minting coins from zinc and then copper. And these would have the picture of the head of the ruler, the king or the monarch, whoever it was. And that kind of made it official. Like these, I see this coin has the head of the ruler, so it must be not fake. Must be real. Must be not counterfeit.
Yeah, it's how they
so
prove
this
that
is
worth something.
The shekels or whatever that, right? And then of course the bad guys would make coins that looked pretty much identical.
Yeah.
Right, and they would cost them 10 cents to make one, but they could get a chicken for one. So that was a problem. Counterfeiting is always a problem, right?
Yeah, it always has been.
And that, in fact, for things like Bitcoin is where it comes down to using a term called proof of work, which is to show the authenticity of the medium of exchange. But as we went on, we got more sophisticated. And then we started to go to something that people valued even more, and that was silver. So, in the days of Camelot, they would carry a bag of silver pebbles or whatever, and then they could pay with some little silver pebble. And then the king would strike a coin with his name or with his head face on it, and that would be the king's currency, and that would be a coin. And then eventually it went to gold, because gold was shinier and cooler. Now there's a problem with gold. That is that gold is a very good store of value. You would want to buy a bunch of gold if you could and then hang on to it. And then 20 years later, when you're older and you can't make money anymore, then, you'd have all this gold, so you could then sell it off to pay for your living expenses. As an everyday medium of exchange, gold is not very good for a bunch of reasons. Can you think of some?
It's heavy.
It's heavy, right?
You can't
so
just
it's very
bring around,
impractical.
Like, you can't just bring around... Like, it's easy to bring around, like, a $20 bill in your pocket. Like, that doesn't weigh anything.
Let's go back for a
gold
second.
Pebbles.
Let's go back for a second, because back in some societies, they would make copper coils. And you could actually just bend off a copper coil and pay that much for something. You'd say, well, how much is that cow worth? Well, how about I'll give you this much copper coil?
Really?
And they'd say, yeah, okay, sure. So they just bend it off and hand them that, and then they'd have the rest later. They could actually, really just adjust it. Okay, now that's pretty hard to do with gold.
Yeah.
So nobody ever shaved off pieces of gold and handed the shavings to anybody, right? It was heavy.
Yeah.
It was very impractical. Let's just think about gold. If that's the real thing and that is money, then you got a security problem.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody would like to get his hands on that gold, and a big pot of it or a chest of it would be worth killing a few of your henchmen and making off with. Yeah. So what did they do? Well, first they did make coins, gold coins, right? And those you can carry a couple gold coins in their pocket. They're heavier than our coins today.
Yeah, I mean, we still do have coins. So.
We have gold coins, in fact, where? In one country.
Well,
which country has a gold coin?
Gold coin.
Pure gold coin.
Not sure.
South Africa. South Africa has a pure gold coin called the rand, and it is valued at the price of gold, so its value changes a lot because people.
Oh, wait, that's weird then, because it's not like the same currency as if you had 4 quarters, that's literally the same as one paper dollar.
That's right.
But
the rand is the rand.
Yeah, the rand is like completely different.
It has always been defined in terms of gold. I think later they got away from that and they have maybe more of a electronic rand, which doesn't. But let's go back for a second to around 1850, 1800s, when, or even earlier, probably in the 1700s, when they decided that it wasn't so practical to carry gold. They would instead make pieces of paper that were exchangeable for gold, right? This is called a promissory note. So they would put the gold in the bank, in the safe, where it could be guarded, and they'd give you a piece of paper and say, okay, this is worth, let's say, 100 ounces. You've got 100 ounces of gold in our bank. Here's 100 1-ounce notes.
Yeah. So here's like your proof. Like,
and that's called the legal tender. That's called the IOU, that you could trade that with anybody. And anybody there, when it was based on the gold standard, could take that note, go to the bank, and get that gold. And that's what the gold standard...
Not even the owner?
Anybody could. If you had that note...
so it has no...
It would be legally tradable to the bank, any bank, if it was a proper note and not counterfeit somehow.
Okay.
Then the bank would take that and give you the gold and essentially kind of rip up the note because the gold is gone. The note represents the gold.
Yeah.
Right? And the note is no longer worth anything. Right? And it's the only way to do it if gold is going to be money, because you can't carry gold around.
Yeah.
Right? So what was the problem with that?
With the
system.
The paper?
Yeah.
People would steal all the gold in the banks.
No, the banks were pretty secure. That's the nice thing about it. You could put the gold in a vault and really guard it. So it was very hard to steal, just as it is now.
Okay.
What was the problem?
The paper would shred really easily.
Excess ticketing. They would make a few extra pieces of paper that they could sell or give away, that they could sell to people. For example, if I'm the bank and I wanted to buy a building next door, I could say, okay, here's a bunch of gold certificates, I'll take the building. Well,
so it's more...
It wasn't 100%...
It's more tickets than they have gold to represent.
It wasn't 100% backed up by the gold.
Yeah.
Right? And that is money printing. Right?
So this was the first ever money printing?
This is the first ever money printing, and it was made famous by John Law in the Louisiana Purchase and several other scams that he managed to do several times in France and in England on the public, where he just printed a lot of extra notes that there wasn't any gold for. And every time a king ever wanted to go to war and he needed to buy a bunch of military stuff, he would pay in printed up notes that didn't have any gold. And that was a tradition, in fact, that continues today. In fact,
but in a different way, because we don't have gold.
Many nations today, when they want to go to war and they need factories to produce a bunch of war material, they'll just print up a bunch of money and use that to pay their bills.
But
we'll get to that later.
But this is the exact same system. That the ticket that represents gold is the same. It's still like a piece of paper that has this much value. Like if there's a lot of a bank full of tons of gold that represents it, doesn't matter. It's still the same effect. Like, you're still trading the same way.
If you could keep it 1-to-1 so that there weren't more tickets than there was gold, then the supply of money would be limited by the amount of gold you could get out of the ground. Right? The only way to print more money would be to find more gold in the ground, bring it up, and then they'd say, "Oh, okay, we'll print another ticket for that and put that ounce in the vault."
And it also costs money to get the gold, in which just printing dollars doesn't really cost anything.
That's right. That's called proof of work. That's right. It does. So if you didn't just print money willy-nilly and just use it to buy whatever, then the supply of money would be limited by the supply of gold. In fact, if you decided to take a bunch of gold and somehow destroy it, I don't know how, put it in space or throw it down a big hole.
Well, they can't do that yet.
Drop it into the middle of the ocean. I don't know. But if you could destroy the gold, then you would reduce the amount of money in circulation, right? But from the beginning of gold-based money all the way till 1970s when they stopped, it was just a game of hide and seek with how many notes there were and how much gold was in the bank.
Still the same game, though.
It never really added up. And whenever governments wanted to spend money, they would just not go find gold or trade for it, but they would just print up tickets. And so
they're still printing up tickets in dollars with gold.
Hold on. We'll get there. So pre-1970s, that was the game. And governments, let's go back to say the 1910s or 20s, would fix the price of gold. It was government fixed, right? They would say, because it's a government dollar, they would say $1 is worth, I forget what it was, 1/10 of an ounce of gold or whatever. It doesn't matter, but they would fix it, right? And then everybody, no one would legally be allowed to trade. So if I trade you $1 for some different amount of gold than the government said, the fixed amount, that'd be illegal. That'd be an illegal trade. In fact, they went so far at some point to just say that ordinary people could not own gold. You could only own dollars. And the gold had to be in the bank. That way we can control the exchange rate. We can't, you can't do any of these backdoor gold deals because what really happened was, and especially between nations, between the United States, England, and France, the price of gold would fluctuate according to the demand, right? And England was on the silver standard for a long time, until they finally, somewhere in the 20s, I think, just essentially said that this isn't going to work because everybody else wants gold. We can't really trade. Nobody wants our silver anymore.
Yeah.
So we'll just go to the gold standard too. It took them a while. I think it was maybe in the 30s that they finally gave up silver. And they had real silver coins for many years, for a long time. But then when everybody was on the gold standard, that essentially broke because they had to have too many rules. You couldn't trade, you couldn't go out in the hills and find any gold and bring it back and trade it with somebody because that would not be the official exchange rate.
Yeah, it's not worth anything.
You could, it would, but you could only bring it to the government to exchange. It would be illegal for you to trade gold with anybody else.
Yeah, you can't do that.
You'd have to exchange it to the government because they needed to control that fixed exchange rate. Which, by the way, they would break occasionally whenever they wanted to go to war and print up just a bunch of extra money anyway.
Well, whenever they need some more money.
So the whole thing sounds good, and there are Austrian economists. What's an Austrian economist?
Someone who believes in physical ores as money, like this.
No, someone who believes that pretty much anything can be money, and everybody should. If you wanted to, it's called monetary competition, money competition. That the Austrians are kind of like libertarians. They say that the government should not be in the money business. Anything can be money, and if Apple Computer wants to make their own money and that catches on and people use it, that's fine.
Well, but that would be
illegal in the United States.
We already have Bitcoin and stuff.
Right, but you can't make other money, and the United States won't recognize Bitcoin as money. The United States recognizes Bitcoin as a store of
But
value.
you can like trade Bitcoin for like things.
It's not recognized as money. Money has to have those three things. So there's two things going on. Number one, the government won't recognize it as money.
Wait.
So for example, you can't pay your tax in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Now that is not true. In some places you can. In I think it's Zug canton in Switzerland, you maybe still can, and in places like I think Nicaragua, you can, because the government has decided to accept it. But in most places, the government says no, it's not money. You can't pay your tax in it. You can't pay most banks won't accept it to pay your mortgage. With leaving cryptocurrency behind for a while, we'll have to say, I want to point out that the gold standard kind of worked until maybe 1910s or 20s, but then came the Great Depression at the end of 1928, 1929, right? And what happened in the Great Depression, and this is based on Scott Sumner's book, the Midas
Touch.
No, the Midas illusion, the Midas something. What really happened in the Great Depression, and a lot of people don't know this, and it's based on some fantastic work by Scott, is that the governments pegged the price of dollars at, and I forget, 22 cents per ounce or something. And they really wanted to keep that price. They wanted to fix the price, but the real price in the real market was much higher. And so what people did was they would hoard cash, because they knew that when the government came to their senses and released it and said, well, that's okay, it's fine, it's 30 cents, per it's now less per ounce, which means the ounce is worth more.
Wait a minute. So what is the Great Depression about?
The Great Depression was about people hoarding cash because they felt that their cash would be worth more when the government later revalued the dollar against gold. And so it was a monetary disaster.
When you say cash, you mean the gold tickets?
I mean dollars.
Dollars. Okay, so they've moved on at this point. They're out of the
dollars.
gold part.
Started in the late 1800s.
Okay.
And there were different types of dollars before that. There were greenbacks and many others. And this is U.S. government price fixing of dollars to gold. And I don't have the exact numbers, but the main thing was that during the 20s, people held dollars because they knew that the government would have to come to their senses someday and revalue the dollar so that you'd get more gold for the same dollar. And so it doesn't make sense to spend it at that point.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to get more gold later for it. And that crashed the economy. It sounds like there's a whole bunch of other stuff with the stock market and bank runs and bank failures and stuff, but the root cause of it was people hoarding money. And that was deflation, right? Because money doesn't move in the economy if people rather hold on to it for later, right?
Yeah.
There's no hot potato effect.
Because that makes their money like an investment that they're saving up because they think it's going to be more valuable.
Right, and for no real market reason, just because they think the government is going to change its policy. And so it was a policy-driven disaster, policy-driven depression that they could have changed any time. And then when Roosevelt became president in 1932, that's the first thing he did. Franklin Roosevelt changed the value, and I think it went from 22 cents to 37 cents, or the other way, in the way that made the dollar worth more. And now that the dollar was worth more, that loosened up and they started trading again. And then later, something similar again happened in the late 30s, and they had to revalue it again. So it was all monetary policy driven, and that caused a lot of pain. And in fact, we will see a history of central banks and their bad monetary policy causing a tremendous amount of pain in the economy, mostly because central banks don't know how to manage monetary policy, mostly because they use the wrong models, and the models they normally use to screw up the economy are called? Keynesian. Right. John Maynard Keynes.
See, this is where the indoctrination really shines
That's right.
through,
That's right. Keynes Keynes had everybody thinking more about government setting interest rates to influence, to speed up or slow down the economy, and that interest rates were the accelerator, gas pedal, or the brake of the economy. And so that's what central banks use, not just in the United States, but pretty much everybody copied the United States. And that Keynesian influence remains today and is still the main way they model the economy at the Fed.
Yeah.
Sadly. But all this gold fixing and gold denominated currency came to a head in the 60s when it just broke. And it was clear to everybody that fixing the price of gold to the dollars just doesn't work. Fascinating books on this, but the bottom line was by 1970, it had reached a point where it was very clear, at least in Washington and New York and most other places, that this is going to have to change. And so they did something really radical in 1971. What did they do?
I don't know.
They floated the dollar under President Nixon. That means they said, guess what? There's no more gold standard. Gold is just gold now. The dollar is all by itself. Now, it was important that the dollar had this relationship to gold for the previous 100 years or so. But at that point, they just let it go and just said, the dollar is the dollar, and we're going to manage it from here using monetary policy.
But in the everyday life of an American, what really changed? They're still using like a ticket paper thingy.
Everything changed. It changed overnight. First of all, Nixon imposed a bunch of price fixing, which was insane.
Like sealing?
Price fixing. Actually, at the grocery store, you had to pay the government price for things. But that didn't work. But you know what was interesting about that time? Nobody knew how to run an economy or set monetary policy with a free-floating currency. It had never been done. It was an experiment. It took some time, and there was a lot of pain. And you're asking what was the immediate effect was inflation.
Yeah.
The immediate effect was that there were all of a sudden more dollars in the economy than people were used to using when it was represented by gold. Now that gold wasn't there was more money, and so people raised prices. And so because they had Keynesian models, the government countered, this is a guy named Paul Volcker, countered by raising interest rates. They didn't know what else to do. And there was a period of pain called stagflation, where there was inflation, but the economy didn't grow for 7 or 8 years in the late 70s, and it was very painful. I remember interest rates of 17, 18% for mortgages.
Is that high?
Very high. Crazy high.
What do we have now?
Right now it's about 6, 7. And several years ago it was 3 or 4. But 17, 18%, that'll just destroy your economy. So they didn't know, but because there's sort of magical thinking going on, it worked. It pulled the money back by raising interest rates. It slowed the economy down, and so got a hold of inflation. There was a lot of magical thinking involved, but then the economy ran okay for some period of time. There was a boom in the 80s, and then it's kind of gone up and down. And the basic explanation for the business cycle for when there's a recession is what Keynes called animal spirits.
There's no way he actually called it animal spirits.
He really did. He just said that people just all got scared at once for some random reason, and then once one group got scared, other people would get scared, and it would just be a positive feedback loop, and that would cause another recession. And so these things came and went, and that was the up and down of the business cycle, they called it. And it was all really because they didn't understand how inflation worked until one man came along in the 1960s and 70s and said, "You guys are nuts."
Was it Milton Friedman?
It was. It was Milton.
The indoctrination is like
it was Uncle
pulsing
Milton
through my veins right now.
It was Uncle Milton. He was not the most stylish of hair, but neither am I. But he nailed it. And Uncle Milton said, do you remember this?
I've seen a lot of Uncle Milton.
Milton said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon.
Okay, I remember that, sort of.
Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It's not animal spirits. It's not business cycle. It's not the market. It's the Fed.
Yeah.
And the other central banks around the world that mostly copy the Fed because they don't know what they're doing either. In other words, it's the Keynesian models that are causing the problems because the Fed is always in the business of screwing around with interest rates, which is really market interference. And Milton called it market interference. Milton Friedman created the monetarist view of the economy. So there are Keynesians and monetarists. There are a couple other fringe groups that we won't mention, but then there's also the Austrians. So these are the three groups right now.
Yeah.
Main groups. The Keynesians are still holding on. They are now called themselves the New Keynesians.
Uh-oh. Is that any better?
The New Keynesians were defined by a guy named Greg Mankiw, some people say. And it was basically just to adjust Keynesianism to account for some real world things like stickiness, price stickiness, and that there were some lags in the system and that it wasn't perfectly friction free like Keynes thought. For example, people won't move. If there were a state that had better economy, it's hard to move to another state because you got your family and your kids are in school. And so that, real world factors created New Keynesianism, which is what the Fed still mostly uses. And we on the monetarist tribe rebel against this thinking because we say that now we're going to talk about inflation.
Okay.
What do monetarists say about inflation? All right, first we want to explain monetarist monetary policy because Keynesian monetary policy is more or less shifting interest rates to stimulate or reduce demand for money, and that can stimulate the economy or it can pull the economy, stimulate a sluggish economy or pull back a economy that's too heated up. But the monetarist view is different. So in the monetarist view, this is the Fed's balance sheet. The Fed's balance sheet has a bunch of assets. We got gold, real estate, maybe some stock. No cash really. It's just assets that sit on a lot of debt.
I'm gonna steal one of these.
Hey, that's gold. A lot of debt. So treasury bonds, other kinds of bonds go into this balance sheet. And what the monetarists believe, and these are the disciples of Milton Friedman and people who've really innovated since then, like Scott Sumner.
By the way, real estate tastes really good.
Well, that real estate? But we believe that, first of all, a small amount of inflation is good. Why?
To keep the economy active so that people aren't just saving up and hoarding their cash.
Right.
And their money, and that they're actually using it.
Right. So if money deteriorates, it
becomes an investment, which is bad.
If the price of things inflates 10% a year, well, that's too much. That's like, wow, everything's going up like programmatically by 10%. I mean, that means we've all got to get more cash in our wallets. Our prices of everything goes up a lot, 10%, right? What's the helicopter experiment? If the Fed were to double everybody's amount of money in all their bank accounts and in your wallet and in your everywhere, overnight, what would happen to prices? When does the amount of money in the economy ever double overnight? Never. Right. Yeah. It's called the helicopter drop thought experiment.
Okay, so it may or may not be real.
No. If
happen.
It happened.
If it happened.
And we know this because of hyperinflation. People will spend their money in the morning rather than in the evening because of hyperinflation. So we know people are aware. If they expect the price will go up later, they will spend now. Right? If they expect the price will go up a lot later, they will spend a lot more now. Right? And that's why we do these discounts and fake time. Oh, time's running out. This sale will only last until midnight on October 31st, whatever. You've got to buy now because prices are going up soon, right? So people will respond to that. Keynesian believed that they would modulate the economy through interest rates, through their infinite wisdom. And this is what Alan Greenspan used to do with his briefcase. Go to meetings and say what the interest rates would be. That was a Keynesian approach to the economy. And those of us who are disciples of Uncle Milton say it's all about the amount of money in the economy. And so we want, and it's nothing else, nothing to do with fiscal policy. What's fiscal policy?
Something I forget.
Come on. Government spending. Yeah. Government spending. This is what Elon Musk doesn't understand. Because he heard a clip of Milton Friedman once.
He did?
That he misunderstood, where if you just take that clip alone, Milton Friedman says, when the government spends more money than it gets, that causes inflation. Now, he didn't really mean that, but Elon Musk...
What do you mean?
Elon Musk says, now he repeats it all the time, he tweets it all the time, when the government spends more money going out than it takes in, that causes inflation. It does not. That is fiscal policy. That's government policy. Government can pay for its overspending through borrowing, and that pushes the debt out to be paid another day by other people, but that does not cause any inflation. On the other hand, if the government wants to pay for extra things like missiles or war by printing money, then yes, that does cause inflation because it's the money printing that causes the inflation, not the overspending.
They're adding non-existent money from thin air into the economy.
That's right.
Which is literally the definition of inflation.
Which is, according to us, according to monetarists, is the definition of inflation.
Yeah.
We monetarists believe that the Keynesians are confused.
Indubitably.
And they don't understand the cause and effect relationship. But we monetarists are sure that it's just one-to-one. The more money, if you double the amount of money in the economy, you double prices. If you cut the amount of money in half, if you could suck half the money out of the economy, you'd cut prices in half too, right away. All right?
Wait, that's where this comes in. This is how they suck money out.
This is how they adjust.
Yeah.
All right, now let's go to the Fed balance sheet. Here's the Fed balance sheet. When the definition of the Fed balance sheet is that it is a bunch of assets that are out of circulation. These assets cannot be put back into circulation, say sold, unless the Fed does it as a matter of monetary policy. It takes an act of monetary policy to sell or buy assets. Now, the first thing that the monetarists believe is that the Fed should not be setting interest rates. The Fed continues to set interest rates, which is a market distortion, a market manipulation. And often there's a real interest rate going on in the economy where people will borrow and lend money differently from what the Fed does. And the Fed knows that, and they use this base money. It's called the discount window rate, that just from banks to banks. And then the economy will set its own rates. But generally, when the discount rate goes higher, all the other rates go higher. And when the discount rate goes down, all the other rates come down. So it really is a one-to-one manipulation of the market. And we monetarists say that's bad. The Fed should not be in the interest rate business. Stop the interest rate nonsense and just manage the amount of money in the economy. You might have noticed that the Fed doesn't do a particularly good job anyway. So let's give them one less thing to worry about and let the market take care of interest rates. So now when the Fed wants to print money, what does it do?
They put more crackers in the bowl.
That's right.
And when
these are assets. So wait a minute, hold on. So they put more. So what does that mean? So let's see how that works. So they go to the market and they buy some Apple stock, a bunch of bonds,
some Nvidia,
some housing bonds that are based on home equity or home payments, housing payments. They might buy other assets from other countries, other currencies. They have a whole mix of assets here. And to pay for those, they make up ones and zeros on computers and send those to the sellers. So someone's selling me Apple stock for, the Fed doesn't buy a small amount. The Fed, let's say, buys $100 million worth of Apple stock. They print $100 million of zeros and ones, send it to that company's bank account, and plop, the Apple stock goes into the Fed's balance sheet.
But doesn't that
so those are new ones and zeros in the economy, which has added money to the economy and taken the Apple stock out.
Doesn't that give a secret advantage to whichever company they pick?
They're pretty careful about No, because they're not going to make a big change. They don't want to buy so much of one stock, so they'll buy a whole bunch of stocks.
100 million does make a difference.
In fact, Switzerland is a small country with a lot of money, and Switzerland has managed to affect the price of several big stocks because they bought a lot, and those stocks have gone up. So Switzerland is even more rich now because so many of their stocks on their balance sheet have gone up so much. But the United States is so big that if the United States buys $100 million worth of Apple stock, it's kind of a drop in the bucket. And they can do it every day. They can just do it slowly over time. They don't have to make a big move. All right, so when they put those ones and zeros into the economy, that adds new money to the economy. Yes, it takes the assets out. That's true. But people don't notice that much about these assets being out. What they notice is dollars in the economy that came from nowhere. Because if somebody else had bought that Apple stock, well, that's just a trade within the economy. But if you make up zeros and ones and just send that to some bank account and just magically make money on that appear in that bank account, that is making up money. Everyone knows it. It's easy to track. And the Fed announces it. They'll say, okay, we're buying, $10 billion worth of assets this week. And so everybody knows there's $10 billion more in the economy at the end of the week. This is not a secret. All right. Yeah. And the balance sheet accumulates that value, but it's out of the economy. And thereby, by printing that money, they can cause inflation. In fact, they can cause as much inflation as they want.
Yeah.
Exactly as much. To the decimal point.
Just like they did with the tickets for the gold. Same thing.
Yes, essentially, that's right. That's right. They can print up exactly as many ones and zeros so they know how much money is in the economy. Everybody knows it, and that will affect prices. But they also might respond with different amounts of business activity and so forth. So there are a bunch of lags in the system and a bunch of difficult things to tell, so to predict ahead of time. But if the Fed says, aha, we put too much money into the economy, now we need to take some out, what should they do? To take out money, you need a money vacuum.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, the bowl, right?
Yeah, you sell the stuff. You sell the stuff back into the market, and that puts dollars into this black hole called the balance sheet, where you can just disappear them. Poof, they're gone. So now that asset is back in the market, but the money has disappeared. And you can thereby reduce the amount of money arbitrarily until you're out of assets. Until you got nothing left, right? But instead, they don't do that. No. Instead, they raise and lower interest rates. And to try to stimulate the economy, they will lower interest rates. And when they lower interest rates to 3%, 2%, 1%, 0%, now money is basically free to borrow, right?
Yeah.
That's called the lower bound. If you lower interest rates more, then you're paying money to people to borrow. You're paying people to borrow money. That's called negative interest rates. It has happened. It happened in Switzerland about 10 years ago. But it doesn't last very long because you're paying people to borrow money from you. It's not a very good trade. You're just trying to get rid of money, right? So that's not a good way to think of it. And so there's this concept of you can't stimulate the economy by going below the lower bound. At zero, you're out of ammo. You can't do it anymore. But that's Keynesian thinking again.
Yeah.
That's interest rate thinking. If you throw the interest rates away, then what have you got? Well, you still got a bunch of assets. All you have to do is sell them and sell those assets and suck money out of the economy. sell more assets,
Well, Dad,
suck money out of the economy.
So what if they just took, let's say, $50 out of every single person's like bank account or something, or like their credit card?
They could
just
do
magically.
That.
Do they do that?
Well, they do it. They do it in the market by selling off a bunch of assets, by selling off something people want. So those people will volunteer. So what you want to do is you want to say, hey, volunteers, anybody willing to give me $1 billion? No? All right, well, so here's $1 billion worth of Apple stock. Oh, okay, that's a trade. So here's the Apple stock, goes back into the market.
And then they just throw away
the money. The money's gone.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I get it.
Right?
Yeah.
And so your firepower is here. Your firepower is what you've got in your Fed bank account, right? And because the Fed started the 1970s with tons of gold, the Fed really doesn't have much chance of running out. If the Fed sold everything from its balance sheet, we'd be down to so much little money that we wouldn't need to go that low ever, really. So the Fed always has firepower. The Fed always has ammo that they can adjust. So now you can see a way that you can increase the money supply, increase inflation, and you can decrease the money supply and decrease inflation. And so what you could do is you could just week by week, you could just watch that. And if you said, we have a goal of 2% inflation by the end of the year, then you just watch it each week. And as you can see, you're getting closer to the end of the year. You just modulate it, sell off or buy assets so that you hit the end of the year exactly at 2.0000%. You could do that.
Okay, so now I've got three more inflation-related questions to ask you.
Oh, by the way, do they do that? No, they have no idea what they're doing. And they're screwing around with interest rates. And so inflation is usually too low or too high.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for the economy.
So there's a lot of people who say, I remember back in my day when gum at the grocery store, like the convenience store, was only 20 cents. What's going on here? I
bought my first car for $500.
Yeah.
Right.
What is this? This is such a scam.
Now it's $50,000.
Now it's $30,000.
How can anybody afford that? How can anybody afford that?
What?
Right. What's that called?
Money illusion.
Stop bouncing. You're bouncing.
Money illusion.
That's the money illusion. Explain the money illusion. What is the money illusion, Micah?
The money illusion is the idea that if it was when prices go up, so does your salary go up. And everything goes up. Not just prices are going up. Prices are going up because the value of money is changing.
Because the amount of money in circulation it's the only thing that can change prices.
Yeah, okay, the circulation.
The amount of money in circulation. If the Fed wanted to have deflation, so there's 2% less money in the economy every year, they could do it. Only problem is?
The only problem?
It would tank the economy.
Yeah.
Nobody would spend any money anymore, right? So getting back to where we were before, 10% is too much, right? 1% inflation, tens, and this is all psychological. 1% inflation is very similar to no inflation, so people won't do much about it. If they don't feel the hot potato effect of I've got some money, I've got to get rid of it because 1%, stick it under the mattress.
How hyper aware are people of the inflation rates in the U.S.? Like, I feel like there's just a ton of American dinguses who don't know anything.
No, and the reason is that if you could get 2% inflation, all the banks and businesses would care. The banks and businesses who deal with money every day, and they are constantly borrowing money and lending money and money moving, and they pay attention to that 2% inflation rate. Because by the end of the year, they've got to pay back their loans, and they want to know if there's going to be inflation or not and how much. Now, if there's 1% inflation, okay, they'll dial that in a little bit. But if there's 2, it's significant enough that you can actually just pay people on staff to make sure that they're making good business decision given that there's 2% inflation. And if there's 3 or 4 or 5% inflation, that, everybody's paying a lot of attention to inflation all of a sudden, right? So now they're making a lot of business decisions based on inflation. So because businesses can see that, consumers follow. Because all the prices and the market activities based on businesses making smart decisions. So you don't have to keep it in mind as a consumer. You just know that the price of your Nintendo Switch or your PlayStation game or whatever just went up $10 from last year.
No, they did
so
have
you can feel it.
AAA video games went up in like 2022 from $60 to $70.
Yeah, and
it is an official cross-platform type thing, like AAA Steam games, AAA Nintendo games, AAA PlayStation games, and Xbox games all turned into $70 games instead of $60.
And that was ultimately business decisions that resulted from the Fed printing money in 2020.
Yeah.
Causing inflation, right? So the money illusion is people complaining that things used to cost less in real dollar terms, 20 years ago, but they are now thinking that they're also getting paid more, or that if they lend money, they get a better interest rate, or if they buy stocks, that their stocks went up, right? So when we talk about inflation of, let's say, 2%, that will also inflate the price of stocks and to the asset value of things that are loaned on, like buildings and homes. And so that all pretty much works and keeps up. What doesn't keep up is money in the mattress. If you take cash, because there's no more gold, that's a separate thing. But if you took cash money and stuck it in your vault under your desk, that's not going to keep up with inflation. That will erode, right?
Yeah.
So the money illusion is thinking that everybody's just got cash sitting under his mattress as opposed to investments. If you have investments tend to keep up with or even outpace inflation. And wages historically have almost always, on a 10-year basis, always outpace inflation. So that the money illusion is really an illusion. And people who like Bitcoin or the Austrians always say your amount of money is shrinking, your purchasing power is shrinking. Yes, for $1, but you don't get $1 anymore, you get $10, right?
Yeah.
So that's out. So what else did you want to say about inflation?
So my second question is, so this is like my first ever experience with like inflation of ever like learning about it, which is, so I was talking with my brother and my dad right here. This was like 5 years ago or 4 years ago or something, and we were talking about, so if a billionaire like Jeff Bezos equally spread out like $3 to every single person on Earth, all 8 billion of us, then what would happen? Would everybody just be richer?
It'd be $24 billion.
Yeah.
Which a few people have. Everybody would have $3 more. How long would that last?
Yeah, but I discovered over years of indoctrination that the market just sets $3 higher. Like nobody is $3 richer. It just
$3 isn't much of a thing because it's $3 in one day, and it might change prices for a little while, but it's not more money in the economy. Now the billionaire has $24 billion less.
Yeah.
Right? It's not inflation. And it's very short-lived. I mean, $3, how long is that? Okay, 2 weeks later, or a week or a day later, you're not going to notice that you spent it. You bought, one ice cream cone is $3. So,
well, is it really good to have quadrillionaires? Like Elon Musk and stuff. Just feels like they're just hoarding the entire world's money.
Are they, or are they spending it and investing in things? I mean, what would Milton Friedman say?
Well, money is a reward for adding value. So the reason billionaires exist is because they are the most valuable people. They have added the most value. Like people like Elon Musk, SpaceX, he's like completely reinvented and redesigned entire industries,
sure.
Right? So of course he's the most influential people are going to make the most money because they're the most valuable. Well, they're making the most difference.
I don't know. There's also people who like Paris Hilton who just make wacky videos and stories and stuff, and they,
Sony, for example,
they just entertain people, I guess.
I'm trying to say that this kind of links into taxes, which is taxing the rich doesn't make any sense because this is their reward for being wealthy, is their reward for changing the world, which the janitor didn't do.
Yeah, but changing the world probably involved trucks that went on roads. Or airplanes that landed at airports.
Yeah, but you don't need so many trillions of dollars.
Might have needed some bridges to cross, or
okay, look, the government
a
shouldn't be trying to fix every single problem in the entire universe.
Right.
Stick to your roads, your basic laws. Don't try to make passport changes and stuff.
Well, protection.
Yeah,
right?
like
protection of people and protection from fraud.
Yeah.
And illegal business dealings and basically things that we really don't want to happen. The government should probably play some role in that. Although there can also be private security firms that can help prevent a lot of bad things too.
But there's just a ton of wasting taxes that is just going nowhere.
Sure, that's right. Governments are mostly scams. Every government in the world is mostly, except for one, a kleptocracy. Yeah. That's the common form of government.
Is the one called Botswana?
It's called Argentina.
Okay. Now it recently changed.
What's happening in Argentina?
Javier Milei.
What does he say?
What does he say?
Yes.
Well, he's trying to combat and counter the years and years of diabolical, extreme poverty from hyperinflation that his country has been living through. From the corruption.
Right, but governments mostly, generally, and this also gets to the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, their general goal is to take money from the poor and give it to the rich. One way or another.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what they do. They do provide some basic services. I would argue that they should not. See, you could say, well, yes, but you get health care in the UK or in Canada. Yes, the health care isn't that great. And in the United States, you don't get very good health care. You get very expensive health care that isn't that great. And the government doesn't do it. But on the other hand, the government sets all the rules and regulations that everybody, and the government designs the playing field, and there's a lot of corruption there. Governments are all kleptocracies. It's all about stealing money from the average person and putting in their own pocket. That usually ends up benefiting the people who own everything.
But there are instances and moments in governments like Botswana with elephants have done a great job with providing for their people at the same time as their elephants and their safaris and their entire country
That's right.
Because of one president.
Well, because they got the economics right for elephants. Those economics maybe can't work for many other countries. But they have worked too well for Botswana. Botswana has way too many elephants now.
Yeah.
But that not to say that the same economics could work for Kenya. Maybe. But every country has to, first of all, get away from kleptocracy.
Yeah, and corruption.
That is the worst form of government, and that is the form of government. And second, try to do something that's reasonable for the people without too many scams. And we have many scams and much corruption in the United States. Europe is full of them. China is a scam, and this is just the normal way of doing things. But what's happening let's go back to Argentina. What's exciting about what's happening in Argentina?
One of the best ever presidents in the entire history of the entire world has just miraculously taken over a destroyed country from hyperinflation. And he's a real libertarian.
What's he doing?
He was on the Lex Friedman podcast. Hint.
Javier Milei.
Wink, wink.
We'll go
wink,
to Buenos Aires
wink.
if you'll let somebody interview you. All right, but what is he doing? He's cutting government. Because just like Milton Friedman said, most of these government projects are just boondoggles designed to put money into pockets. But he has said, my contempt for the state is infinite. I think those are his words, or almost. That means what? My contempt for the state is infinite.
The state.
Yes. It means I hate government. Government is bad. Government is always bad.
Well, this is why he has the chainsaw. He's
That's right.
He's carving out all the nonsense, all the corruption out of government, just sticking to the basics.
Just getting rid of government departments.
The best thing you can do for government is leave your people alone. You don't need to make the department of blah 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 and this
Right.
and try to solve every single one of your people's problems.
Right.
The best thing you can do is not have 30% taxes.
Put their money back in their pockets.
Yeah.
And let the market solve the problems.
Yes.
And it would be interesting to talk to Millet about what he thinks is necessary for, let's say, infrastructure or for protection, possibly for international trade or banking. I don't know. Be interesting. I'd like to know where he draws the line, because just like Milton Friedman, Milton Friedman was big on defense. He didn't think that the people could just figure out how to do defense and just do it by the market, because then there would be too much wars just being started by companies. On the other hand, the governments aren't very good at the whole war thing either, and they often have too many adventurous wars and go invade other countries way too quickly.
Yeah.
So where is the right place to draw the line? That's maybe a conversation for another time, and it's certainly something I'd like to learn more from Javier Milei, because I think he's the best politician in the world.
Yeah.
By far. What do you think Javier Milei will do about the Argentine peso? Because everyone has told him, and he's talked about it, they could just flush that down the toilet and go to dollars in Argentina. And that would be tricky. Some countries have done it. It's called dollarizing, right? Some countries work on dollars. What are those countries?
Who accept dollars?
Where dollars is the currency in that country.
Well, there's a difference between having your country
US
be in
dollar.
a different currency, but wanting the official currency to be dollars, but it's currently in the transition phase, than actually being 100% dollars.
It takes a few years to dollarize an economy,
Yeah.
but it's been done. Panama did it a long time ago.
How do you dollarize or switch a currency?
If you go to Cambodia, everything is in dollars. They even have their own old currency, but it's all dollars. It's just it's just straight dollars. There's no change. There's no exchange. The exchange rate's always fixed. So it's you just pay for everything in dollars when you're in Cambodia, and in a lot of other places too. So he could do it, and that would make Argentina subject to the U.S. Fed's monetary policy. And the decisions they make here in Washington at the Fed might not be right for his country in Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not doing it yet. But another way to look at it is, but the peso is such a disaster that even going with the dollar, if it's not great for Argentina, it's got to be better than what we have with the peso. And so that's an ongoing conversation. And if we went down there at his invitation and he sent his private jet to pick up
hint,
Lex Friedman, I mean Micah Siegel,
hint,
for an interview,
wink, wink,
that would be a big question on the table. Tell us, Millet, what do you think about dollarizing your economy? I'd be fascinated to learn what he thinks.
Yeah. Okay. The sponsor of this video is Rogue Scholar Academy, which is my official website. You can find my conservation stuff and my book and everything that's going on with me there at roguescholaracademy.com.
roguescholaracademy.com.
Indubitably.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. It's my pleasure.